Prabhupada Paramahamsa Bhi Radhakacharya Stotra Sapta Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Shri Bhai Charanarvind Bhakti Vedanta Swami Sri Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Swami Viti Founder Acharyas Divine Grace Shri Prabhupada Ki Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Harinam Sankirtan Ki Varṇāśrama-dharma Ki Dainita Gaura Ki all glories to be some devotees, all glories to be some devotees, all glories to be some devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and to Sri Gauranga, all glories to Sri Prabhupada Ki. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Gyananjana-shakaya Chakshuramitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam-scha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaganam Raghunatam Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabharutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakan Vitam-scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sati Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhu Yaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Narayanam Namaskritya Dharam Chaiva Narotamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very means of conquest, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayana Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Sri Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Prayashavadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering a service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed or practically tamil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Shakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasyayanam Mahat. This Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, is a king of the transcendental, king of Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, the Sri Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya,
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 Om Asrabhyaya Namaha,
Om Sarvabhaya Namaha,
Om Asrabhyaya Namaha,
Om Sarvabhaya Namaha,
Om Asrabhyaya Namaha,
Om Sarvabhaya Namaha,
Mukhaṁ karoti vāsaram pāṁ gayate girim yatripādamaham vande Sri Guru Dinatham, yatripādamaham vande Sri Guru Dinatham. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our morning Bhagavatam class. In keeping with the theme that we will be presenting later on this morning in the seminar, which will be on traditional education. So we have a verse which is kind of introducing us to that from canto number 10, chapter 11, which is entitled The Childhood Pastimes of Krishna, text 37. Evam Rajokasam Pritim Yacchantau Bala Chestitai Kala Vakyai Sva Kalena Vatsa Palau Babhuvatuhu Evam Rajokasam Pritim Yacchantau Bala Chestitai Kalavakya Sakalena Vatsa Palau Babhuvatuhu Evam Rajokasam Pritim Yacchantau Bala Chestitai Kalavakyai Svakalena Vatsa Palau Babhuvatuhu Evam Vrajau Kasam Pritim Yacchantau Bala Chestitai Kalavakyai Svakalena Vatsa Palau Babhuvatuhu.
Evam Rajokasam Pritim Yacchantau Bala Chestitai Kalavakyai Svakalena Vatsa Palau Babhuvatuhu Evam Rajokasam Pritim Yacchantau Bala Chestitai Kalavakyai Svakalena Vatsa Palau Babhuvatuhu.
Ladies. Yashanto Balachestitai Kalavakyai Svakalena Vatsapala Babhuvatu Evam. In this way Braja Okasam to all the inhabitants of Braja Pritim pleasure Yachantau giving Balachastitai by the activities and pastimes of childhood Kalavakyai and by very sweet broken language Sakalena in due course of time Vatsapalau to take care of the calves Babhu Bhaktuhu were grown up. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace of Prabhupada. In this way, Krishna and Balaram, acting like small boys and talking in half-broken language, gave a transcendental pleasure to all the inhabitants of Braja. In due course of time, they became old enough to take care of the calves. Can you repeat after me? In this way, Krishna and Balaram, acting like small boys and talking in half-broken language, gave a transcendental pleasure to all the inhabitants of Braja. In due course of time, they became old enough to take care of the calves. Report. As soon as Krishna and Balaram were a little grown up, they were meant for taking care of the calves. Although born of a very well-to-do family, they still had to take care of the calves. This was the system of education. Those who were not born in Brahmana families were not meant for academic education. The Brahmanas were trained in a literary academic education. The Kshatriyas were trained to take care of the state, and the Vaishyas learned how to cultivate the land and take care of the cows and calves. There was no need to waste time going to school to be falsely educated and later increase the numbers of the unemployed. Krishna and Balaram taught us by their personal behavior. Krishna took care of the cows and played his flute, and Balaram took care of agricultural activities with a plow in his hand. End of the purport. Translation again. In this way, Krishna and Balaram, acting like small boys and talking in half-broken language, gave a transcendental pleasure to all the inhabitants of Braja. In due course of time, they became old enough to take care of the cows. A little background information. This verse comes after a series of verses describing and explaining how when Nanda Maharaj, Mother Yashoda, and all the other residents of Braja, they were actually living in Gokula, and due to many disturbances caused by Kamsa, who was sending various asuras, this is all nicely explained here. Nanda Maharaj decided one day to call a meeting, and they all decided we should leave Gokul and go to another place. That other place, of course, is Vrindavan. This happened actually soon after, in the month of Kartik, that whole Damodar Lila. So soon after that, that is when this move from Gokula took place. Krishna was still very, very young, and so here it mentions how Krishna performed his childhood pastimes, started to speak and have broken language. But then as soon as he was old enough, we can estimate approximately 6 or 7 years of age, he was given the responsibility of looking after the small calves. And in this rather short purport, Srila Prabhupada gives us an insight as to what is meant to be a Vedic education for the vast majority of people, especially for the vast majority of young boys. Vedic education, as outlined here, for those who are more intellectually inclined, those who can take up academic education, is meant only for the Brahmanas. And we know how the percentage of Brahmanas in any society is quite small, very small percentage. It means that the majority of people are not meant to go to what is called formal school or formal education. There's basically two kinds of education, what we call formal and non-formal, or academic, which, as Prabhupada mentions, is primarily meant for Brahmanas. Kshatriyas also will take up some amount of academic education because they have to study the Vedas, Shastra, because one of their primary responsibilities in society is to uphold the principles of Dharma, to protect Dharma, both in terms of the principles or the laws of Dharma when they are broken, and also in terms of physically protecting the land, physically protecting citizens, physically protecting cows and other animals, etc. So when Prabhupada makes this statement, this is Vedic education, this should prompt us to try and think and understand what is the actual implication. Because in modern day society, naturally, we think of education in terms of going to school, going to a place, a building, sitting behind a desk and and looking what's written on the blackboard, etc. Yesterday we were in our seminar making the point how, a very essential point, how Vedic culture is an agrarian-based culture. If we take Vrindavan as the prototype, as the example, and we should take Vrindavan as what is meant to be the ideal lifestyle, as actually representing what the Vedic culture is all about, then we can relate, we can understand, we can begin. We cannot immediately fully comprehend this statement made by Prabhupada here that this is Vedic education. But actually it is so. Vast majority of people within a Vedic culture are not meant to go to formal school, both boys and girls, actually. Because most people don't have the intellectual ability to deeply study the subject matters. So when we live in that type of natural environment, which is directly connected with cows and with land, as is the case of the residents of Vrindavan, as was the case for the majority of people in the world up until not that long ago. There's a conversation between Prabhupada and some disciples wherein one devotee is making the point that yes, the problems we're having today, they've been there for a very long time. Prabhupada actually corrects him. Prabhupada was aware of the relatively recent developments that have brought about the kind of chaotic situation in which we find ourselves in modern day society. Prabhupada corrected that devotee and told him, no, it's only the situation we are facing today, the very disturbed social condition in the world, is relatively recent, means it goes back just a few hundred years. Because, as we mentioned yesterday, it's very much connected with the whole, again, relatively recent development of what we call modern industrialization. The Industrial Revolution brought about major changes that we are still facing in modern day society. It means that actually before 200 years, and of course in places like India, we can still see remnants, depends on where one visits, but one can still go to villages in India where many of the activities that we can read about in the Srimad Bhagavatam in terms of Vrindavan village still exist. How to understand that going out with cows is education. That is what we need to think about. And it is not something that immediately we can comprehend. What we generally forget about or are much less familiar with is that Vedic culture also has what is called 64 different arts and sciences that are meant to make up Vedic culture whereby both boys and girls actually can study all types of subject matters, some of which include, for example, music, chanting, dancing, playing various instruments. There's a whole list. One of them is called Krishna Krida. Krishna Krida is one of the 64 books that describe these 64 arts and sciences, which was recently translated, recently means a few years ago, by one of our devotees in India. Many of these are much less known today. Many have yet to be translated from Sanskrit, largely because, we've abandoned, but in modern day society we have abandoned this traditional way of living, which is meant to be in villages, whereby the main economy, the main means of livelihood are in connection with the cows and the lamb. We were looking briefly yesterday at what is described as Chatur Vidya, the 4 Vedic sciences. And the fourth of those, of course, is the science of economy. Vedic culture, Vedic knowledge is already giving us what are the means by which we can organize society, what are the means by which we are meant to meet our different needs. And these are very elaborately described in various we call books of knowledge, including the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and other literatures as well. So, in this book, Krishna Krida, Krida means actually games or plays. Young boys, when they would go herding the cows, they would spend the whole day. They would go early in the morning. We read descriptions in the Bhagavatam that depending on where they would go, Mother Yashoda would pack a lunch for the boys. All the mothers would prepare a lunch because they would be gone all day. They would go to some forest that would be far away. Vrindavan, the 12 forests of Vrindavan, they're all forests. They're all forests. There's a book written by, I believe, Raghava, a Prabhupada disciple who passed away actually not some months back in Mayapur. He wrote, for one book, he wrote a number of books. One of them is describing very wonderfully the different forests of Vrindavan. We know the main 12 forests, but there are like 108 main forests, and then there are like thousands of forests. And that is, in the Vedic culture, actually forests, that's a whole subject matter. They have different names and they have different purposes as well. Nowadays, practically we have no forests. It is estimated that in America, 94% of the forests are gone, destroyed. Yeah. And in different degrees in other places as well. So, going out with the cows, or in this case, beginning, the young boys would begin their training and their education by going out with the small calves, because they're small boys. They can't handle immediately the big calves, or the big cows rather. And so what do? The cows are grazing and they play all kinds of games. They interact with one another. They exchange thoughts and ideas. They invent so many things. It's a whole education. They also have already learned from adults in the village various arts that have been that are practiced, that are part of the Vedic culture. Again, because we are disconnected with the land, we're disconnected with this lifestyle. It's just it doesn't equate. It doesn't mean. It's not significant for us. That's why, in many ways, similar to the whole science of devotional service, we know how in the Nature of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita, which is the book that is, where Srila Rupa Swami is very much in detail explaining this whole science of bhakti, the different levels, sadhana bhakti and bhava bhakti and prema bhakti, and how very intricate it is and very deep subject matter, very confidential. In a very similar way, this dealing with, this interacting with the material nature in terms of how we should be living, how we should be interacting with the natural resources, which is meant to be for the vast majority of people within a country setting or a village setting, is also very much hidden. It's very much hidden. The whole occupation, for example, of cow protection, the whole subject matter of cow protection, for that matter, the whole subject matter of agriculture. It's like, some people are very good, are more naturally inclined at producing, even in the small garden they have, the expression, people have a green thumb. They're very expert in growing things. Other people don't have that ability so easily. So this is very much part of, not only part of, but it's in many ways the central, connected with the central occupation and lifestyle of those who know about what is meant to be the actual, we call Vedic prescribed duties in society. Difficult for most of us to immediately relate to this in a very significant way, but we should try to understand how these are referring to what is meant to be the standard in society. Here, of course, it's referring directly to, Krishna and Balaram when they're quite young. So in a similar way that Krishna and Balaram, when they're about 6 or 7 years of age, they take up this particular activity. Then the young girls in the village are also, and these are described in the Krishna book and in Srimad Bhagavatam, they also are engaged in various activities that is generally connected with, also with cows. We see very sweet pastimes of, the gopis taking various milk products, going to exchange, and Krishna trying to prevent them from going. So many things are taking place in Vrindavan. But it's all centered on this very simplified lifestyle, again, connected with what is meant to be and what is described as the Vedic, the natural Vedic economy. So Srila Prabhupada was trying in so many ways to point out the need and importance for us to revive this lifestyle, isn't it? One of the important goals and objectives of our Krishna consciousness movement is to bring back, to revive, to re-establish what we call Vedic culture. Well, this is Vedic culture. Vedic culture is not just sitting down and chanting the holy name. That is a very important part, of course, of the Vedic culture. But majority of people cannot sit down for a long time and chant the holy name. Majority of people are not meant to be in temples. Majority of people are living out in the world, engaged in various activities, and we are meant to get proper insight in terms of what are meant to be, what are the more ideal activities, or to use a term that is often in Srila Prabhupada's purpose, prescribed duties. So this point I was trying to make out, or to point out yesterday as well, how we have simultaneously spiritual prescribed duties, and we also have material prescribed duties. Material prescribed duties in terms of what is being recommended in the Shastra. It's interesting how even in modern day society, psychologists, anyone who studies psychology, they will know, they will understand how when, especially young people, young boys or young girls are allowed to interact with their peers in a more natural setting, it is very healthy for their psychological development, for their character development as well. So there's a whole science that is there, even in, we could say, ordinary setting. What to speak of a more ideal, natural setting, which is directly connected with what is meant to be the ideal lifestyle, which is described, in the pages of the Bhagavatam. Which means that actually for us, for all of us as devotees, these descriptions that are there in the Bhagavatam regarding the pastimes of Vrindavan are not only meant to help us understand, the whole spiritual dimension where Krishna is engaged in all kinds of, wonderful relationships with his devotees, and everyone is wanting to serve Krishna, wanting to remember Krishna. That is taking place. I mean, Vrindavan is, the pastimes of Vrindavan are glorified by the devotees as being the topmost, most exemplary pastimes, because Krishna reveals in these pastimes all of the different kinds of relationships that he has with his devotees. So all of this is taking place, and which is generally what we as devotees look for and relate to at the same time. And this is very important, and we tend to not think about this, or tend to neglect it, or minimize, or we just can't actually relate to it. But the science, the whole lifestyle of not only Krishna and Balaram, but all the residents of Vrindavan, because while Krishna and Balaram as young boys take out the calves, well, the elders, the elder men, take out the cows and the bulls, because that's the main activity. Or others are engaged in growing food. So the point being that we have in Vrindavan, that's why Vrindavan pastimes, so important for all of us. They are meant to be the ideal example in terms of spiritual development, spiritual relationship that we can develop with Krishna. And simultaneously they are serving as example of how, materially speaking, we are meant to live. Sarva Kama Dugamahi, as mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Sarva Kama means all of our material needs and necessities, they come from Mahi, they come from the land. You know, Prabhupada again and again was trying to point this out. We are ultimately depending on the land, and modern society has taken us away actually from this lifestyle, from this understanding, and therefore we are living a very unnatural, very artificial, very unsustainable lifestyle, which is actually very dangerous. And if we don't understand this, then that is not good in so many different ways. So this purport, although very short, is pointing out these two levels. Later on we'll spend a bit more time on what is meant to be formal education, which is in relation to Gurukula and some of the subject matters that are meant to be taught in such Gurukul, and should give us an opportunity to discuss a bit more on the subject matter of education. So these of these four Vedic sciences that we were referring to yesterday, the two of them are directly pointed out here. Krishna, who at the end of the purport, Prabhupada mentions how Krishna is teaching us by personal example every day, and by going out with the cows and playing his flute, because playing the flute, sound vibration. Sound vibration is very attractive to the cows, especially because flute playing is, especially when Krishna plays the flute, is like mesmerizing, practically, we could say. And there are descriptions of that as well in the Nectar Devotion. So the other science is the science of education. So in other words, the science of economy is what Balaram represents by having his plow, and he's in charge of agriculture. And directly connected with agriculture is cow protection, both of which, Balaram, Krishna and Balaram are involved with. So these two sciences are like taking place on a daily, are being displayed, are being lived on a daily basis by both Krishna and Balaram and the other residents of Vrindavan. We can stop here and maybe hear any comments or questions on this subject matter. Hare Krishna. And yeah, I think the microphone is just now coming. I think the first hand I saw was in the back. Yes.
Just microphone.
Microphone.
You mentioned economy of Vrindavan.
Yes.
Наша экономика выстроена таким образом, что человек, допустим, вырастил яблоки.
Our modern economy, in our modern economy, so people, for example, grow apples.
Эти яблоки нужно довести до города.
And then they have to transport these apples to the city.
Но это не просто машина, это дороги, это обслуживание, это бензозаправки, это добывающая промышленность, это машиностроение, это полиция.
And it requires roads, cars, petrol, and so many things.
No.
И дальше, за каждой стадией стоит огромное количество людей. То есть у нас между производителем и потребителем вмещается, по сути, все государство.
And there are many people involved in this process, from the person who produced some food stuff, and between like customers. There are so many people involved also. In between.
А в экономике Вриндавана производитель посадил яблоню, да, и она будет плодоносить 20 лет и приносить очень много яблок. И достаточно протянуть руку и взять. То есть все очень сильно упрощается, и такой эффект экономический, который есть в экономике Вриндавана, его нет ни в одном бизнесе.
And according to the Vrindavan economy, everything is easy. Just apple tree gives apples, and everyone can just take apples from the tree. But in our modern society, in business, we cannot see such economy.
То есть то, что кажется простой жизнью, на самом деле является очень мудрой. То есть Кришна так придумал вот эту естественную жизнь на земле, которая дает совершенно мудрость во всем и целесообразность.
Krishna gives us wisdom, intelligence in everything.
Krishna?
Yeah, Krishna.
Krishna what?
Krishna gives us intelligence and wisdom in every activity.
No, Krishna created everything is perfect. She said about this lifestyle is perfect to understand wisdom.
Which lifestyle?
Vrindavan lifestyle.
Green lifestyle, yes. Okay. Just want to make sure what lifestyle. Yes, Krishna's activities in Vrindavan and activities of all the residents in Vrindavan is meant to be our example, our model, and we still see that in some places. Village is generally what we call largely self-sufficient. Villages will interact with other surrounding villages, and you see, there's many things we don't understand. People in villages, they primarily grow to meet their family needs. The primary purpose for growing food is very different than modern day society, where people grow food to sell food. In Vedic culture, you don't sell food. You can exchange excess that you have for what you may not have. There are two maxims that is important for us to remember. One is that produce only what you need. We're meant to produce what we need for our family and more, of course, because there are festivals or there are guests that will come, etc. So these two maxims are unknown in modern day society. Produce only what you need, number one. And secondly, use only what you produce. This is a very high standard, but actually that is meant to be, it's like if apples don't grow everywhere, right? It's like bananas don't grow everywhere. I'm from Canada, and bananas, there's no bananas. I mean, we get bananas shipped in. We get so many things shipped in. So the idea is that we, in the Vedic culture, we are taught to grow what we need and utilize what is more easily available. Yeah. So yes, Vrindavan is that ideal place, and we don't see so much example of that. I mean, in modern day agriculture, and also in modern day education, it's very far from that ideal example of Vrindavan. Yes.
Maharaj, just again you mentioned we should, in an ideal understanding of living off the land, we just produce what we need and we will only use what we produce. And then you're also mentioning how in Canada you don't have bananas. And when I think about this aspect of living self-sufficient, then this thought comes in my mind, if I would do it, do I really want to do it here? Because here you cannot grow many things in Switzerland, and you have a long season of being cold and no vegetation. And
yes.
Then the thought comes, maybe, okay, if I want to do it one day, I'll go to India or Indonesia. What would you say about this?
Yeah, well, yes. Good point. In the Shastra, it actually mentions, don't mind, that actually one should not live in a place where mango trees, banana trees, papaya trees don't grow. I don't know.
March.
Most,
You need to maintain this.
You see, you look at history, even now, majority of people live in Asian countries. America was only discovered a few hundred years ago because it's not meant to be the natural place to live. So we're there now. You're here, I'm there. It's part of the karma that we're all reaping, but we're living in places around the world where it's like a major struggle just to survive. We have to fight against the harshness of nature. It's like, here you have snow, you have long winters. I mean, in Canada we have long winters as well. So, but still, 100 years ago, people who were in Canada, they were, even now, of course, much less of a harsh situation, but they were living largely off the land, and like in our community in Western Canada, every devotee, most of the families who grow food, they know the art and the science of preserving food for the winter. You go to Hungary in Krishna Valley, and they have like a huge root cellar, beautiful, and the whole science in terms of how to keep food when we live in such areas. So the idea is that the basic principles of living as naturally as possible, even in maybe less natural environment, is possible. And the whole principle behind Varṇāśrama is to simplify our lives so that we can remember Krishna and ultimately advance more easily and more quickly in Krishna consciousness when we reduce our basic material necessities of life. But we've built a whole society now whereby we are, we have basically increased our way of living, our comforts of modern day life, and of course we've created that whole there's that saying that the rich are becoming more and more rich and the poor are becoming more and more poor. So that disparity we're creating at the same time. And you know, what is the American dream? The American dream is that we accumulate all kinds of material goods and facilities, falsely thinking that this is how we will become happy. This is not the Vedic version. This is simply inducing and falsely making people believe, because most people are kind of more simple and more innocent, don't have so much of understanding. So of course we cannot immediately possibly make this kind of change, but we should know that this is meant to be the more natural way of living, and we can begin. Otherwise, if we don't begin this process, we remain caught up in this artificial, unsustainable world that has been created by non-devotees, and we continue our hard struggle both materially as well as spiritually, because when you work in that kind of environment where you're associating, which is the situation for most of our devotees as well, we're living in this modern lifestyle, we're forced to associate with non-devotees in a non-devotional atmosphere, making it extremely difficult in so many ways.
Can I add a question?
Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry, I have the mic.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. We can go a little longer today.
Yeah.
So okay, I hear you encouraging that there's an ideal, but we can start wherever we are. We just try to bring it up.
Right.
I just connected to the quotation you had about not living in a place where there is no. So there's a reason why that statement is in scripture. It has something to do with the quality of a place.
Yes.
And connected to many factors. And in the connection, I'm often thinking we are in a place, we are outside of that description. We are not in a place where there's mango trees and banana trees.
Yeah.
And one aspect I find also, I notice in my life, and I know many devotees tell me, we are living in a place where the sun, you have days in the summer that are very long, in the winter they're very short, in the winter you don't have much sunlight. And basically my understanding is it has something to do with the gunas also, that if you're in a place where it's more stable, the sun movement,
Yes.
and you have regular sunlight, you're going to be naturally more inclined to be in a sattvic
Yes.
atmosphere. But here and that's what I maybe want to say, I feel the tamagun is really sometimes in the winter, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean in Montreal, in Canada, people go mad in the wintertime. Those who can't make it to Florida. You know, the psychologists and psychiatrists in the wintertime are very busy. People become depressed because, you know, yeah. So that's, you know, we're reaping, it's karma. And it's karmic reaction that is there. Where we are born and what facilities we have or don't have, it's all connected with karma.
So maybe a very practical question now. I was thinking about our timing schedule in the temple. Because in the winter time, originally the idea is that you should get up before Brahma Muhurta.
Right.
But in winter time you get up way before Brahma Muhurta. And on top of that, we don't have much sunlight during the day anyways.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm wondering, maybe, of course for a devotee it's no issue, he doesn't need sleep, but for a conditioned soul to practice sadhana bhakti,
Yes.
do you think there should be some consideration of adjusting these things?
Yes, yes. But we should also keep in mind that it's not only the conditioned souls who are conditioned, our devotees are also conditioned.
That's what I wanted to say. I was thinking about myself and others I see who are practicing.
Сейчас он ответит, сейчас сначала. Он не ответил еще.
I need to fill up the battery.
Yes, Mike is dead.
Разрядился.
В Украине, в Черкасах, по Черкасам, есть там Прабху, который с Матаджи делает общину. Он там делает кунжу, Прабхупада библиотеку. Он так вдохновлен сильно, что я просто поражаюсь его такой силе этой. Может быть, как-то его поддержать,
Сейчас чуть-чуть
с
паузу
ним
сделайте,
связаться.
чтобы могли. In Ukraine, there is one Prabhu and Mataji. They are Vihaskas.
Сама дала.
They're creating also общину они делают.
Да, да, у
They
них
are
там
creating
коровы есть,
Vaishnava
по-моему, там
community.
один.
They also have cows. Что еще там у них?
Ну, у него там корова, он кунжу построил для Прабхупады. Он там делает теплицы, библиотеку Прабхупады
He
делает.
has built kunja for Srila Prabhupada. They have a library. And выращивают что-то.
Да,
They grow
коровы,
also vegetables.
коровы есть у него там.
Ukraine.
Yeah,
Ukraine.
Если бы с ним связаться, чтобы его поддержать, он такой вдохновленный, вообще там такие дела делает. Вриндаван делает прямо.
He's creating Vrindavan, that Prabhu. And Gurunishka Prabhu says, maybe you can contact that devotee also, I don't know.
Well, I'm going to Ukraine in 2 weeks.
Он едет в Украину через 2 недели.
Да.
Махарадж,
Да,
Махарадж.
можно как-то с ним
Да,
связаться
yeah.
телефоны, чтобы его вдохновить.
He can give you,
Yes,
he can give you his
please,
phone number,
yes,
of that Prabhu. Yeah.
Please give their contact. We are looking for Vrindavan type people.
Он говорит, пожалуйста, дайте мне его телефон, мы как раз ищем таких людей, которые создают вриндаванские общины.
А в какие вы едете?
No, I mean this is the such devotees in such circumstances are to be, you know, what is it? Are to be praised because it's under very difficult situations that they are endeavoring to follow, you know, in terms of Vedic culture and growing their own food and living off the land, etc. like that. It's not it's challenging, but even it means it's possible even in less natural environments.
В какие города вы едете?
Somebody who didn't yet have a chance to ask right
Yamuna.
behind.
Yamuna.
Yes.
Я еще не закончил.
Ваше время истекло.
Стекло, да, ваше время.
Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for your lecture. In the purport, we hear the Prabhupada saying actually we shouldn't waste time in so-called education that is actually not. And I was recently listening to a lecture by Bhakti Maharaj, and he was very strong on this point that it is actually wrong that we encourage devotees to waste time in that sense and become wealthy and so on. And I have a practical question now. Like my mom, for example, she really thought, yeah, it's probably the wrong thing to send us to school and so on. And I still think if I have kids, what to do in that sense? Is it better to let them live according to their Varna, like if they like to be outside and so on, just leave them, or is it nowadays still needed that we send our kids to school?
We should be very strong and very clear that, you know, the type of education which is recommended in the Shastra, we should provide that type of education to our own children, which to a large extent we're not all over the world actually. And therefore even non-devotees are understanding and turning towards homeschooling. More and more people in the Western world understand how modern education is just not at all ideal. For so many reasons, and they prefer, introducing the concept of homeschooling. The idea is that the more we live according to what is recommended in the Shastra, the more we live according to what is described, especially in Vrindavan, then automatically we get to introduce what is meant to be the real type of education, and therefore, students or young people or even older people, at any time if they want, they can get the kind of so-called modern education that is there. But we as devotees and as parents, as devotee parents, we should try to provide, more and more devotees are choosing also homeschooling for their children. Or we should think directly in terms of, these two forms of education, one being Gurukul, for those who have that natural inclination, or it's only when we can create communities that we can give the opportunity to our children to be raised in a more natural type of environment. It's not so easy to abruptly, it's not possible, I would say, to abruptly make that kind of change, but we should be conscious of we should know what is the ideal, and we should basically work towards coming as close as possible to that ideal. Homeschooling is definitely more in line with what the Vedic culture is teaching us, as opposed to allowing or sending our children to modern day public school. Yeah. So that's for each community in our cities, and ultimately each parent to decide. But we have a responsibility as a society, and we're not doing a very good job at that, to actually provide the kind of education that is recommended actually in the Shastra. But that type of education is not possible unless we create the proper types of communities, and we are very slow in doing that. So therefore, on the long run, who will suffer? Well, our children will suffer. The future generations, if we're not working on the basics, if we're not preparing for the future, if we're not laying the foundation based on what Prabhupada has given us and explained and what is there in the Shastra, then we are furthering, we're rendering ultimately a disservice to our own devotees, especially to our children, who have to who are forced to be exposed to all of the demoniac elements of modern day society, which are largely present in modern day educational system as well. It's a major topic of importance that more of our devotees, more of our leaders within the society need to address. And you see, when Prabhupada mentions that the system, and again he tries to explain this point to us, this whole system of Varṇāśrama is the way for those who want to consider being civilized, and this more natural way of living, which is connected with cows, with land, is also the standard that is taught in the Shastra. Well, the more we put that off, the more we are neglecting to follow the instructions, then we're not in line with Prabhupada's mission. Simply, there's a mission. The Lord has a mission. His representatives have a mission. Part of that mission is to make or bring about these changes that are recommended, that are explained in the Shastra. And in our case, our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, gave very clear and definite instructions in that respect. Yes?
Maharaj, maybe.
Yeah, right.
Because they can also come to the seminar.
На семинар придете?
Ask more questions.
На
There's-
На семинаре
because
вопросы.
if you're not coming to the seminar, there is more opportunity here. But then you can show the eagerness also attend the seminar.
Вообще на семинаре вопрос. То сейчас уже время
Сейчас
лекции
уже
заканчивать.
да.
Уже поздно, да.
Красавчик.
На семинаре.
I mean, that would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. Okay. Yes, so those who would like to hear more or discuss more or who have questions on the topic are invited to come seminar to start here. Actually, it can be here
In 1 hour.
In 1 hour from now.
Jai.
Okay. Jai Varṇāśrama-dharma ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
His Bhakti Raghava Maharaj ki Jai.
Stimulating, not questions.
Krishna consciousness is meant to be stimulated.
Well, we all know it is in us. That's what we like to do. And then not many dare to speak.
So we have to address that. But
I think today is very busy for me. Maybe tomorrow or even Monday. Would you like to check or suggest?
yeah, I'll check. And Zaira will nice backdrop.
Yeah.
Nice comment.
Yes.
Yeah,